Good morning. I'm Ruth Van Lillian, the minister of this congregation. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Tuscaloosa, a covenantal community founded on love and a common devotion to our free faith. We recognize all the earth as sacred ground, and we welcome each other into this virtual space. We especially welcome those visiting with us. We're so glad that you are here this morning. We invite you to connect with us through the comments or via our website or Facebook page. We join with all member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association in affirming and promoting our 7 principles, including the inherent dignity and worth of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, and the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. We bear witness to the pain and suffering of persons of color in our communities and across our country, and we continue in our commitment to fight injustice and to search for ways to build a better world. Black Lives Matter.
Good morning. I'm Anna Schubert, the lay service leader for today. There is a link in our order of service in the video description below, along with other useful information. If you are viewing from a smart TV, you may not be able to see the links and comments below. In that case, you can access the links and comments by going to the UU Congregation of Tuscaloosa YouTube channel through the YouTube app on your smartphone, tablet, or personal computer. There are a number of important announcements in the order of service, so be sure to check. Our church website and Facebook page have information about our online activities. Also, members and friends should read all the Newsnet emails and our monthly newsletter to stay updated on congregational matters. We also invite you to our online Zoom coffee hour immediately following this service so that we may join together in real time for community and fellowship. See the link in the links and comments below or in the Newsnet email. The prelude prepares us for the service.
We invite you to light a chalice of your own at home. This might be a simple candle in a bowl or something more elaborate that you've made or purchased. We light this chalice as a beacon of our faith and as a reminder of our commitment to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We worship together, though we are at a distance, by celebrating that which is sacred to us, individually and collectively.
Our opening words are call and response. Your response is, "It is possible to live in peace." These words are from Mahatma Gandhi. If someone with courage and vision can rise to lead in nonviolent action, the winter of despair can, in the twinkling of an eye, be turned into the summer of hope. It is possible to live in peace. Nonviolence is not a garment to put on and off at will. Its seat is in the heart, and it must be an inseparable part of our being. It is possible to live in peace. Nonviolence, which is a quality of the heart, cannot come by an appeal to the brain. It is a plant of slow growth, growing imperceptibly but surely. It is possible to live in peace. If a single person achieves the highest kind of love, it will be sufficient to neutralize the hate of millions. It is possible to live in peace. If we are to reach real peace in this world, and if we are to carry on a real war against war, we shall have to begin with the children. It is possible to live in peace. The future depends on what we do in the present. It is possible to live in peace.
Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
When we gather in loving community, we remember that we do not travel this earth alone. We share our lives as we light candles and hold each other in meditative thought and reverence. I will light a candle in my home as you light a candle in yours, and we will observe a moment of silence while you share your joys and burdens in the comments below and engage with each other in celebration and condolences. I will now light a final candle for all those burdens and celebrations shared in our virtual spaces and for those that went unspoken. May the warm light of these flames bring us peace.
Let us spend some time in silent meditation, and then I will close us with some words from Nelson Mandela. We understand it still, that there is no easy road to freedom. We know it well that none of us acting alone can achieve success. We must therefore act together as a united people for national reconciliation, for nation building, for the birth of a new world. Let there be justice for all. Let there be peace for all. Let there be work, bread, water, and salt for all. Let each know that for each the body, the mind, and the soul have been freed to fulfill themselves. Let freedom reign. Amen. Shalom. Blessed be. Good morning. Oh, I'm so glad that you're all here with us today. I'm sorry I don't get to see you very often. I miss the kids of our congregation. I want to tell you a story today about my own family, and I have a picture to show you. It's my dad, and it's me when I was a teenager. And the other person in the picture is my little brother, Michael. You may not know, you may not have had a chance to meet my brother. He's visited a few times at our church. But Michael is adopted, and that means that his parents couldn't take care of him when he was a baby. And so they gave him to someone that could take care of him and find a new family. And lucky for us, our family became his new family. And he was kind of a big baby. He was a toddler. He was walking when he came to us. And you may also notice in the picture that he looks different from myself and from my dad. And that's because he was born in Vietnam. And so he looks like the people who live in Vietnam. And the story I wanted to tell was about when he was about the age you see him in the picture, maybe 6 or 7. And, you know, when he was really little, he never thought about looking different from his family. But at around 7, he began to realize that he did look different. And sometimes the children at school would say something if they saw him with our mother and say, "Why do you look different from your mother? Are you Chinese?" Well, he knew he wasn't Chinese, and it bothered him. And I remember one time, came home from school, we were all sitting together in the living room, and he was very unhappy, and he said, "Mommy, why do people keep calling me Chinese?" Well, my mother took him into her lap, and she said, "Well, there's nothing wrong with being Chinese. Chinese people are very nice." She said, "But you're right, you're not Chinese." She said, "You come from Vietnam, and that means that you were born Vietnamese." She said, "But you know what? There was a war. Because of the war, your parents couldn't take care of you, and they gave you to somebody to take care of you until they could find a new family. And now you're part of our family, and we live in the United States, and that makes you American. So if people ask you, you don't have to get upset. You just tell them, well, I was born in Vietnam, but now I live here, and I'm an American." It's important to remember that when you notice things that look different about people, whether it's the color of their skin, or maybe it's the way they talk, or maybe it's how they move. They might be in a wheelchair, or they might have equipment on their feet or their arms, or maybe they can't see and they have a special white cane, or there might be any other differences. Have to remember that you don't want to hurt their feelings. So you treat them the same, you love them, you're kind to them. You can ask your parents at home about those differences, and that way you can learn about them without hurting their feelings. Have a good week. Bye-bye.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Out of gratitude for all we have been given and all we have now, we share our resources because we love and trust each other, and because this church enriches our lives and empowers us to make our world better. We rely upon each other, members and friends, and we appreciate the payment of pledges and the generous donations to support the legacy, vision, and work of this church community. Contributions may be made by PayPal using the link below in the description, or by mailing checks to UUCT. All undesignated contributions will be divided between our Split the Plate recipient organization and our congregation. Our Split the Plate partner for this month will be shown on the screen as you're listening to this. Please mark your pledge payment to UUCT in the comments field on PayPal or in the memo line of your check. If you prefer to write a check to the selected organization, please mail it directly to the address we include in the description of this video. The offertory music will continue in this window as you open a new window to make your contributions. By the work of our hands and the generosity of our hearts, our love is made real. Thank you for these gifts.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. This African American hymn is a lament for what has been lost, a crying out for what is needed, and a declaration of perseverance in the search for beloved community and all that it means. Today, let it be a lens through which we examine our congregation. What kind of community are we? In January of 2017, a series of events took place at the Unitarian Universalist Association, which resulted in the resignation of President Peter Morales and led to widespread conflict and consternation across the UU world. It all centered on the insidious influence of white supremacy culture in the UUA, which has never been addressed effectively. The General Assembly that met in June of that year in New Orleans created a new Commission on Institutional Change and charged them over a period of 3 years to conduct an audit of the power structures and analyze systemic racism and white supremacy culture within the Unitarian Universalist Association. The result of this work is a 228-page report entitled Widening the Circle of Concern, which is filled with data, analysis, methodologies, testimonies, theological examinations, conclusions, and recommendations. While it is focused on the macrocosm of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and we are one of the congregations that are part of that association, it has plenty to offer us in the microcosm of our local congregation. There is more hope somewhere. One emphasis of this report, which comes up many times throughout, is the covenantal nature of our faith and of the formation of our local congregations and of the association of those congregations. A covenant is a voluntary agreement made between and among parties who desire to connect in a meaningful, long-term relationship for which they have mutual hopes and goals. Marriage is probably the most common example of a covenant in our culture, which we have all witnessed and in which many of us are currently or have been personally engaged. As a minister, I have officiated at many weddings in various settings. Wedding vows vary greatly these days. Some couples write their own, while others are glad to select from many options. I encourage brevity, but some go on at length. Bill and I wrote ours together one afternoon, visiting the botanical gardens, and looking back, I acknowledge that they went on a bit. Alternatively, I know a minister couple who married at a commune in the 60s. The officiant hitched up his tattered jeans as he tossed a 2x4 onto the ground in front of them. And he asked if they were both willing to toe the line in their future together. They answered yes, and in that brief moment, they were married. And they are still married after 60 plus years. While the process of writing vows and exchanging them has much significance, it is what comes afterward that really matters. Creating the covenant is just the beginning. Living it out is the real work. The other places we are most likely to encounter covenants are religious or faith communities. Every Unitarian Universalist congregation is a covenantal community. Visitors are very welcome, and some become active, contributing friends. But those who want to become fully a part of the congregation take the important step of becoming members and entering into that covenantal relationship with the other members of the congregation. The Widening the Circle of Concern report talks a lot about covenant as a key to the health and wholeness of a congregation. A covenant which includes the goal of dismantling white supremacy and centering the voices of the traditionally marginalized will give a solid foundation to the transformational work required of us. Our congregation does have a covenant, but it was created in 2007 and it needs revising, which is work for the whole congregation. So that is in our future. And when we approach that work, we will want to consider matters of inclusion, of centering those marginalized voices, and establishing greater equity in our church community. Dr. Vincent Harding was one of my professors at the Iliff School of Theology. He was a black Mennonite minister who worked closely with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. during the Civil Rights Movement. When I traveled to Denver for my interview, Dr. Harding shook my hand and said, "I remember your father when Martin and I traveled to Birmingham." He spoke kindly about Dad's contributions to the process. It was wonderfully cool to listen to him in class talking about Martin said this and when Martin did that. Later, Dr. Harding taught me many important things about civil rights and how the movement influenced and affected churches then and later. One important concept which is echoed in the Widening report is the understanding of church as community in a culture which so highly values individualism. In a Christian context, this is the belief in individual eternal salvation from sin and damnation. Each individual is held responsible only for their own relationship with God, regardless of their relationship with their neighbor or the state of their neighbor's spiritual well-being. Dr. Harding taught me about a different understanding of salvation, communal salvation that begins in the present rather than exclusively in the afterlife. Dr. Harding offered me a new understanding of salvation. We sink or swim together, as compared to the orthodox idea of every man for himself. Either all are saved or none are saved. It was a radical idea to me 30 years ago and challenged the religious individualism I had been raised with. How could my salvation depend on the salvation of everyone else. The Protestant Reformation gave birth to a theology of individual salvation in the efforts by several religious leaders in European countries to push back against the hierarchical system of clergy, power, and authority in the Roman Catholic Church. At its core was the important idea that people did not need clergy mediation in order to connect with God and receive salvation. By taking the power away from the priests and putting it directly in the hands of the people, reformers made the spiritual journey more personal and gave each individual authority over their own relationship with God. It was a revolutionary movement, and wars were fought between Protestants and Catholics over these ideas because they all hinged on power and on resources. Of course, there were later multiple movements to reform the reforms, and there were movements to reform the Roman Catholic Church as well. The struggle for religious freedom led to an exodus of religious outcasts from Europe to the newly colonized North America. Each group sought the freedom to live out their theology, and sometimes also looked to establish their own religious dominance over the region they settled in. The foundation of colonialism, which involved the conquering and subjugation or extermination of indigenous peoples who already lived in the Americas, has poorly served the message of God's grace as available to all. The institution of slavery, entangled in the system of colonialism, has left a toxic legacy to all churches and our entire society. These various religious groups did imprint upon this nation the idea of the individual as self-determining and free to exert power over his own life. Of course, for generations, this individual freedom only belonged to white male landowners. Everyone else lived under their power and exercised individualism at the pleasure of those with the correct gender, racial, and wealth designations. Certainly much has changed in the ensuing years, and we are left with a powerful confluence of ideas about individual power and freedom. The Widening report brings this element forward as part of the framework which enables white supremacy today. Every man for himself is a cultural norm, and even if we replace man with other words descriptive of gender, race, or socioeconomic group, it still communicates a destructive permission to be concerned only about myself and maybe my immediate circle of family and close friends. And the rest, as the particularly relevant saying goes, can go to hell. I realize that most of you, like myself, have given up the idea of damnation in the afterlife. There is plenty of hell to be found in the world today. And if we are not living right in it, the television and the internet can provide us with a front row seat. The concept of individual salvation is as pervasive and destructive as it has ever been. If you doubt it, look at the controversy over wearing masks as an effective method of slowing the spread of COVID-19. The medical experts tell us that if everyone consistently wore one in public, we could get the virus under control in a few weeks. How much rhetoric are we hearing spouted about personal freedom and the right to not mask? How many are living out the decision to let everyone else go to hell? The Widening the Circle of Concern report prods us to ask ourselves as Unitarian Universalists whether we believe that everyone is actually on their own to sink or swim alone? Do we believe that individuals must save themselves? Do we believe that white, cisgender, heterosexual, wealthy folk should have most of the power in our churches because they are the majority of our membership? They have put in the most money. They have been members the longest. They have most of the societal markers for status and success because it has always been that way. And everyone else can fall behind, can be underneath. Everyone else can go to hell. Or at least go away and stop inconveniencing the us in power here. Do we believe that? Do we believe that if there is more love, hope, peace, and joy somewhere, then maybe those people should go seek it somewhere else? Are we willing to acknowledge our shortcomings and to do the work of anti-racism and anti-oppression to remake our congregation into a radically hospitable community? And by the way, I have as much work to do as anyone here. There is much more in the Widening report to consider as we look toward the future of our congregation. For today, let's think about what kind of new covenant we might create together which would express who we are and who we want to be as a church. Let's consider whether we are merely a social club of individuals who gather as long as everything is comfortable, or whether we are a community where everyone is committed to common hopes and goals for living out the UU principles in the larger community, including the dismantling of white supremacy culture within and without our walls. Don't we want to be the somewhere we are singing about? There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere. Amen. Shalom. Blessed be. There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere.
read with me the words at the bottom of your screen. As we extinguish this chalice flame, let us remember that we carry the light within ourselves, which brings healing to a broken world and hope for the days ahead.